He goes to the hospital, says he's been to Liberia, and they send him home with some antibiotics. Do we really need more evidence that our hospitals are nowhere near ready for Ebola? With me now, infectious disease specialist, Dr. Bob Arnott. Good evening, Bob. I'm furious. To me, this hospital is responsible for anyone who contracted Ebola in the 3 days that he was home, quote, vomiting all over the place after he was sent home by the hospital. What do you think?
Well, Judge, you're the first one to say it. I think you're dead right. I spent 10,000 hours in emergency rooms, ran 137 at one point, and as a physician, I would have come in and looked at him and said, gee, where are you from? Liberia. Have you been in contact with any Ebola patients? Oh, you carried several. Okay, excuse me. I'm going to immediately take all of my staff and say, anybody who's been near this person, so let's stop right here. The fact that he was let out of the hospital is inexcusable. To blame it on an electronic record system on the nurse is silly. I mean, they're responsible.
But Bob,
it never should have happened.
Listen, today they came back and said, we were wrong when we said it was a flaw in the system, that everyone, the doctors and the nurses, had that information. Did you know that? That happened today.
I saw that. I saw that they retracted that. But I mean, it's the very first, even if you had 30 seconds with this patient, it would be the first obvious question. And the fact is, the system has failed from the moment he got to the airport there to the moment that they picked him up at his house. It's failed every single step of the way, multiple steps, probably 6 or 7 where he could have been and should have been stopped.
All right. Let's talk about the fact, Bob, that, you know, I'm a parent. I mean, when my kids were little, as soon as school started and you're a parent, I mean, every little kid comes home sniffling with a fever or a tummy ache, and then the parents end up getting it. How do you distinguish between the normal flu, with flu season coming upon us, and the parents are going to be crazed about whether or not Ebola is somewhere in the country?
I have a 2-year-old. I mean, I've had that same conversation. So bottom line is, you're not going to have any idea. In other words, if your child or you has a headache, a sore throat, you're a little weak, you have some muscle aches. My older son, in fact, has all those symptoms right now. But it's only when you start to get the diarrhea, the vomiting, and then the bleeding that you really have enough symptoms to say, hey, this could be Ebola, and that's too late. And that's why you have to have a pretty good clinical suspicion, and that's based entirely on, do you think you were in contact with somebody? In other words, this individual. If you don't have contact, that's the only real sort of clue. Now, the good news is there's a PCR test, and that takes roughly 3 to 4 hours. So you can know pretty quickly. But trust me, there are going to be thousands of people descending on emergency rooms with just flu or a hangover, and they're not going to have Ebola.
All right, and are we prepared? I mean, what is the what is the antidote? What do we give people if we're concerned or if they have Ebola? Do we have enough of it?
Well, so the bad news is it's all supportive care. That is, you give them what's called an oral rehydration salt, or you give them an intravenous fluid to basically replace the fluids and the electrolytes that they may have lost.
That's easy,
if you're
right?
lucky, you'll get a hold of this MZAP medication, which is basically a monoclonal antibody against the virus, but there's very, very little of that. Bottom line, outside of transfusing blood from somebody who's been affected, there's not going to be much of anything you can do except hope and pray.
All right. Let's talk about the weaponization of Ebola. People talking about the fact that, you know, even our troops can be contaminated with this, or that it can be part of biological warfare.
Well, remember, Judge, that the whole reason that we even have a vaccine track and we have these new medications is because USAMRIID, which is the U.S. Army Biological Weapons Command, has classified Ebola as a Class A bioterror agent. Now, here's the distinction. Weaponizing that in terms of taking, you know, a biological laboratory and having artillery shells, I mean, that's very sophisticated and very, very hard to do. But a poor man's way of doing that, you know, if you have a terrorist who's able to get a hold of a sick patient and then take, if you have these suicide bombers as an example, and you have them infect themselves with the blood and then come to the United States and, you know, sit in hospital emergency rooms and go into schools, sure, right now you could take and not weaponize it in terms of the true sort of technical sense of the word, but to be able to spread the virus, absolutely, it's something that could be done tomorrow morning.
All
without
right,
question.
Bob Arnott, thanks so much for being with us this evening.
Thank you, Judge.
And coming up, ISIS beheads